Hello, puppies and kittens. Welcome to another episode of Matter of Fact Science. It is my distinct pleasure to be hosting this show, wherein I get to speak to some of the best minds in the world. And so today we're talking about anthropology. I'm meeting with a fellow anthropologist. I say fellow anthropologist because I have just recently received my long sought after diploma, my Bachelor of Science degree in anthropology from the School of Human Evolution and Social Change, which is affiliated with Arizona State University's Institute of Human Origins. And so, in celebration of that fact, I'm having David Orenstein join me. He is an anthropologist who's
Hello.
teaching anthropology. Hello, another one of those people whose name is Professor Blankety Blank PhD. Used to teach anthropology. We'll talk about a little bit about that. But he's also a secular activist like myself. We met at dinner for American Atheists back in April.
Back in
So,
April.
Professor Orenstein, how are
Yeah.
all things, sir?
All is well in the field of paleontology and in the area of anthropology that I think we all really love. The secular world, however, needs a lot of work.
Yeah, so I was just alerted today that the Supreme Court has decided to
Oh, yes.
contradict, that just outright contradict our separation of church and state by
Yes.
allowing. There was some famous wise man who said that nobody should be forced to send tax dollars in support of a church to which they do not believe.
Mm-hmm.
And I forget the name of that wise man. It was one of the founders of one of the states back east. And it pains me that our now horribly corrupted Supreme Court, made of such very bad choices for justices pushed through by some very bad people, have ruined that institution such that there's little or no wisdom left in it
Yeah.
to make
And
decisions like that.
sadly, the worst is yet to come, I fear. And usually I'm a tremendous optimist about human life on the planet in many different ways. But currently, I think we're all waiting for the Roe decision to drop within the next week or so. And then the future of things like who you can love and who you can marry. And so many other issues are going to be come up through the court from these people who have a religious preference to stop not only secularism but human rights. That we're going to see more stuff hit the fan, so to speak. And it's great that we have FFRF and SCA and the whole alphabet soup of secular organizations lobbying Congress. And I'd shudder to think about the world without them. But you've got this 6-3 Supreme Court now, and Aaron, as you mentioned, a corrupted court with corrupted people who put them forward. And this is what we're suffering through right now.
Yeah, we've seen so much. In I want to say 2015 or so, I thought, well, we're at least finally beginning to make some progress. I was a little embarrassed that we were behind Mexico and Ireland on a couple of things that I thought where we should be the leaders of the world. We should not be following, any other countries on these,
Right.
especially not countries that we've made fun of for the very thing that we're failing at now.
Right.
And when they turn out to be more progressive than us, but it seems that little bit of forward progress was immediately undercut. And of course, we've just gone down since then. And I feel like our status as leadership in the world, economically, scientifically, truly, that we are going to go the way of Brazil.
Well, there is a segment of the global population that thinks the Emancipation Proclamation was too much progression, sadly.
Yeah. I've seen arguments from people in my own state, and even on the board of the board of education for my state, advocating for reinstating slavery or for justifying slavery at the very least.
Right.
Yeah, they're like when they wanted to take out when they wanted to remove Thomas Jefferson as a reference in the history books and replace him with Jefferson Davis,
Okay.
who, of course, famously used the Bible as justification for why we should keep slavery intact because that's the way
Absolutely.
God wanted it.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So outside of that news, uh,
Okay, I'm going out the window now. Thanks for a great time. No.
so tell me a little bit. I saw that the couple of books that you wrote that you have listed
Sure.
on your webpage. I mean, Godless Grace. I have a question about that one. What is the summary of Godless Grace?
So it was one of my first books, and it was really an ethnography. Since I've been a secularist and an activist for a very long time, I wanted to sort of write a book and do these mini biographies of people in the world who are doing the good work of non-belief and trying to heal the world, if you will, in many different ways, in politics and in the environment, in social services, and just liberating people from the negative world around them, not for the sake of getting into heaven or pleasing a daddy figure like a god, but really speaking to people from um, uh, around the globe who are atheists and humanists and non-believers, who see the importance of making the world better in their own time for the sake of everyone else. And that is essentially the book. So we, myself and my co-author Linda Ford Blakey, who is a psychologist, we spoke to a whole bunch. This is 2015 when this book came out. Spoke to a tremendous amount of people from around the world who were doing all this really good work. And the consensus is basically, the pillars of it are that, you know, all of the activists felt that there was this urgency, that none of the work that they were doing was for the self, that the internal motivation was to help others. There's no martyr complex, but the idea is that there's an urgency to help because this is the one and only time that we have a chance to live. And because of that, wouldn't it be a better place on so many levels if we helped make the environment better, or we
I,
made sure that people had health care, or we made sure that people, had good drinking water and things like that. So those are the people who were speaking to, and they were all atheists and they were all humanists. And it was a great book to write because it got me in really speaking to people from every continent who were activists for the sake of humanity.
and that reminds me, this show was the brainchild of my wife, who is listed here as S.J. Beck. Most people know her as Lalandra Ra. I
Yeah.
habitually fail to introduce her when I get into the thing where I want to introduce the guest, and then I realize, of course, well, not everybody knows who she is, so I should point that out. So
That
what she
happens in
does,
real life too.
what she does is she monitors the chat for questions, and so what we like to do in this show, that as I said is her brainchild, is I get to talk to her, and I will talk to whoever the guest is for a half hour or so. And then we would open up to selected relevant questions from the chat, and those are what she's
Mhm.
searching for at the moment. My first question for you is just personal things. I mean, I understand that you're an activist, and I want to understand the motivation for that, and I
Mhm.
also want to understand the motivation for the degree in anthropology specifically, and whichever you think is the more relevant or appropriate to start with. Let's do them in that order.
Well, I have to blame my father for both of these things because in 1968 he took me to see Planet of the Apes. And if you've ever seen the movie, you see that there's this really big battle between science and theology. Dr. Zaius is both the chief of science, but he's also the chief defender of the faith. And that movie, when I was about 7 years old or so I'm dating myself now, had a huge impact on me because I grew up a very secular person. And so I never really had a tremendous amount. Faith was not thrown down my throat. I didn't have to reject something fully because it was so temperable. It was on the side, and so I always felt very strongly about uh, being non-religious. And growing up in New York, I had that freedom, you know, and so that brought me into alignment with the two things that have sort of motivated me throughout my entire life, which is discovering or uncovering the history of our common humanity, which we do in anthropology, and also being an activist for secularism and for the good of humanity through living a non-religious life. And
I
so there's
saw.
sort of there's sort of my own personal DNA that is wrapped together. And I'm very fortunate because I've been able to take my interest in both and turn it into this career where I'm a full professor in the City University of New York teaching anthropology. And then I get to do my activist work in my own private time, and they sort of feed on each other. And so, it's been a great ride so far.
I
You
appreciate.
mentioned that you're an activist. What groups are you part of?
Sure.
Secular groups, and what do you do? And what do you recommend as far as secularism goes for the XYZ secular organizations?
Okay, well, I think it's a great question. So I've been locally, I was involved in many years with New York City Atheists. I'm currently the president of the Secular Humanist Society of New York. I've been on the board of the Center for Free Thought Equality, which both Aaron and I were both on. Aaron, I don't know if you're still on, but I'm not on it any
I
longer.
was I was voted off, not one of the popular kids anymore.
Uh, well, there's always room at my lunch table for you.
Thank you.
Sure, man. And so at the I was the American Humanist Association representative to the United Nations for 5 years, and recently, for a very brief time, I was involved with AAI, uh, but left that pretty quickly for some personal reasons, which, because I have an NDA, I'm not going to really talk about
Yeah.
in any detail. But I've been doing this for probably about 10 years. And in terms of the second part of your question, I've always felt as a leader in this community that we have, is that it's important to create the biggest tent as possible to bring everybody in. And I don't think there's one particular way to be an activist. I mean, some people can give their time, some people can write, some people can speak, other people just want to give money. I always say that people should just do what they feel that they can do. To me, that means more to me, because not everybody has the or wants to be out in front. Most people want to just do maybe boots on the ground work, or they just want to write a check. So whatever works for them, whatever works for anybody who wants to be part of the community, that's what we should encourage. I don't think, first of all, I don't want anyone to be me, and I wouldn't want anyone to be anybody else. So whatever you can give, whether it's your time, whether it's your money, whether it's your interest, that's what you should do.
Yeah, well, I started out carrying signs on the steps of the state capitol, and yeah, but one of the things that I know that we need is always organizers, event organizers, and of course participants for practically everything. People ask me all the time, "What can I do?" And I'm like, "I don't know what you can do.
Right.
Only you know that." The
Mhm.
best I can tell
Mhm.
you is here's some of the things maybe we could use, and I'm
Mhm.
sure we could use a lot more. I want to mention when you mentioned what you said before, a shared thing that we have
Mhm.
between us is Planet of the Apes, and in particular, Dr. Zayas.
Yes.
I saw him not only as the confusing thing of being the head of science and the head of the faith at the same time, but I saw that as a political thing. And
Mhm.
boy, has Dr. Zayas come to life in politics of late.
Yes, absolutely. Oh,
But
can
I
I?
saw it then. I saw it as a
Yeah.
child. I saw that these are political type arguments,
Mhm.
and it's all propaganda.
That's right. Yeah, yeah. I mean, you'll get no friction from me on this. I mean, I remember watching, Dr. Zayas take that airplane that Taylor throws and crumples it up because it can't exist because, we haven't invented it yet. So we have to delete it. We have to censor it. And lo and behold, here we find in the United States and then around the world this whole idea of censoring ideas, censoring facts, you know, choosing to believe mythology or superstition over facts for the sake of religious doctrine
I have to read a
or
couple of
other
these super chats.
supernatural ideas.
I
And
have,
it's very scary because that, you know, we this is what I love about being an anthropologist, and Aaron, you probably feel the same way. I think that humans are a real schizophrenic species. We are as um, potentially brilliant as we are dastardly bad. I mean, what other species can go from first flight in like 1919, right? Or Orville and Wilbur Wright to rockets in like 1962.
I think that was actually I think it was actually 1903.
1903, excuse
Yeah.
me, I'm sorry. But my point is, in 60 years, we go from fledgling aircraft that go 30 feet in the air to being able to shoot rockets into the sky and bring them, and that's in a short span of 60 years. When you think about the millions of years of human evolution, and the fact that we've only been here 300,000 years max, to be able to accomplish something in the blink of an eye, like 60 years, is incredible. At the same time, we have groups amongst our species who are obsessed with pigment, essentially, how much melanin you have, and deciding that, well, that's too much melanin for my God, or that's too much melanin for me to see you as an equal.
Just to throw something else on there, we were accelerating so fast it seemed, that 1903 to 1963 and breaking the sound barrier,
Yeah.
for example, and then just to put a damper on that, the Jetsons, the Jetsons were supposed to be in the year 2022,
Yeah.
and likewise Blade Runner. We passed
Ah.
both of those.
Mm.
So suddenly we've done a significant slowdown in our progress for all
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
and indeed it seems like we're doing a reversal on a lot of it, which is hugely frustrating for me.
Yeah.
But
Well, you have people like Madeline Murray O'Hare, if you remember, said, what if we didn't have 500 years or 700 years of the Dark Ages, which are essentially a religious event? Where would we be?
yeah,
Maybe we would be surpassed the Jetsons at this point.
yeah, I
I mean,
remember
you
that
can
being
even go back to people like John W. Draper, who wrote this incredible book and Andrew Dixon White, who was an American, who were both free thinkers in the 19th century, who wrote these incredibly classic books about the war between modernity, even in the 19th century, and essentially science, and how religion tries to claw that back. all the time because it's an affront to the idea of, oh, the world is created in 6 days, or, we can't accept geology because, we've only been here for 5,000 years, because that's still out there.
Let me ask you first, what have you done as far as either teaching or activism, preferably activism, that you're happy that you have done or have been involved with, just to familiarize people with who you are and what you do?
Oh, sure. Okay. Well, as an activist, I've always felt, trying to work globally and locally at the same time is really my goal. So when I was with NYCA, New York City Atheists, for many, many years, I had a lay leadership role in developing several programs for them, namely bringing community development through films and reading books together, and having these great book clubs together to talk about the atheist or humanist perspective towards a lot of different readings. For AHA, for like I mentioned, for 5 years, I had the good fortune to be the United Nations representative. So that was not necessarily so much local, but global. And there, I saw the soft white underbelly of what I felt was very frustrating for me, because I always had this idea of the UN as being this really open and democratic place, and then you find out that it's really chock full of people who are being pulled by the diplomats and religious-based countries to annul or avoid creating a more healthy world. um, I mean, I saw that many times, and I was on the Freedom from Religion and Belief Committee, as well as several others. And I always got the impression that at the UN, there was this bias towards, oh, religion can make it better. Like, this is how religion can help fix the things that religion breaks all the time.
Yeah, religion is rather like alcohol, the cause of and solution to all of the world's problems.
Yeah, yes, exactly. That and so I got really frustrated after 5 years. I remember speaking to the then director of the AHA and saying, I want to be the change. I mean, I respect Martin Luther King and the idea of, in my own time, trying to make things better, especially since I'd spoken to all these activists who were on the ground doing all this great work. And I felt that after 5 years, it wasn't going to be through the UN. In fact, I think that the UN, and again, this is another place which I would hate to see a world without the United Nations, because however corrupt and stunted it is, it does save lives. It does try to make the world a better place, except that it's tripped up by its own set of, I always think about, as someone who's works for a college, academic politics are just, mountains out of molehills. And that's certainly the case with the UN. Maybe it's not mountains out of molehills, but it is such a political body, where I've seen religious-based nations fend off quite considerably the ability to say that people have a right to a secular world, and stopped documents from going forward from saying that. So
it surprises me
it was frustrating.
It surprises me that the concept of secularism evades so many people in politics.
Mm-hmm.
That they think that secularism means atheism,
Right.
and I don't understand how they don't seem to understand plurality. As a matter of fact, they're aghast at it.
Mm-hmm.
They want special privilege.
Right.
It's all about, it seems, greed and privilege and being more special than everyone else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I was told, a Christian told me days ago, that freedom of religion means that you're welcome to worship Jesus in any Christian denomination you like.
Oh my God.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
That.
on that note, it seems like even in the times of whoever wrote Solomon's Proverbs, there's nothing new under the sun, or it might have been Ecclesiastes.
Mhm.
And it seems like we would invent a way, like, to make an in group and an out group because it's politically expedient. So you're talking about how there's so much opposition to critical race theory, etc. I'm assuming that's what you're talking about. That we're still having these arguments about race,
Mhm.
and also like Black Lives Matter, which triggers some people if you even say that.
Right.
And so like even in Blade Runner, it was about the rights of AI, like
Mhm.
as autonomous beings. So it seems like it's such a politically expedient tool to marginalize a group of people in a society.
Yeah, we are very much still very tribal, and I think that's probably, as I like to tell people, we are still evolving, socially, biologically, linguistically, and we are not the be all and end all to evolution. If you accept evolution, in fact, that's my next book that's coming out hopefully by the end of the year, which talks about human evolution in great detail, is that there, I always say that and I just wrote this, a post about this on Facebook, quoting my next book. I'm not anti-human. I'm anti-hubris. And to me, that's the distinction that I think if more of us took, whether we see ourselves as religious or secular, or atheist or whatever, humanist, if we lowered that temperature just a few degrees, I think we'd all be less tribal and more able to see each other, see our common humanity. For all of this differentiation, you're only talking about, the smallest amount for all of the variation in every human population. You're talking about, 0.00000009%, like such small amount leads to such diversification, right? So that's the beauty of evolution, is that we can have all of this variation in our genome, and it's okay to have variation in our culture, but that doesn't mean that just because my culture is different from your culture, that your culture has any less value. I don't want to be relativistic here, but I do want to make it clear that it's important to respect people's heritage and identity, as well it is to hold people accountable when they violate things like your right to live a secular life.
Yeah, it seems that there are factions of this country that are all about promoting and preserving human rights.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are large swaths who are all about taking away those rights,
Yeah.
restricting them, and so forth. And that's the primary division that I see politically in the United States right now. So,
And it shows up as red state, blue state. It shows up in like all these different things. And
yep.
I mean, I think, and I've said this, I think that democracy eats itself from the inside out. And I think that's what you're sort of seeing here is the earliest stages of failure, of social failure. I mean, maybe 100 years from now, we'll look back on this and say we went through a rough patch, and look how much better it is. We won't be here to see that or understand it, but from living through it, it seems to me like we're at a point, at least in the United States, where we're no longer, not that we ever were a more perfect union, but we don't seem to be connected the same way from the purpose of a national identity.
When they
We have
established
our
this government,
regional and local identity, but we don't seem to have a national identity anymore, like a lot of successful democracies do, but
Well,
we don't.
well, I remember when they established this government, somebody stopped Benjamin Franklin on the steps out of the Capitol as they signed all these documents and everything to declare what kind of country we're going to be. And she asked, "What have you given us, Mr. Franklin?"
Mm-hmm.
And he says, "A republic, if you can keep it."
Mm-hmm.
So we
Exactly.
bring up democracy. And we always talk about democracy, but it's important to remember that technically this is a democratic republic. This is a
Mm-hmm.
republic, meaning that it's a government that is based on law.
Right.
Yes, it's laws that are changed according to the populace. And the reason I bring this up is because I see people in the chat we're not necessarily in this chat, but I see people commonly getting confused about this point. So I
Mm-hmm.
want to throw out the clarification. One last thing on your vocation, if you would.
Sure.
You mentioned paleontology earlier.
Mm-hmm.
So what aspect of anthropology are you most involved with?
Well, in my younger days, I was a primatologist by training. So I was in the field of primatology, primarily, though, not working in uh, outside of the United States. So I did a lot of work at the Bronx Zoo, working with gorillas, because I was at the start of the movement that was really turning zoos into more habitable places for animals, especially
Instead of
higher primate.
prisons?
I'm sorry?
Instead of prisons?
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. You know, if you look at the 19th century zoos, or even through the 20th century, they didn't look like habitats. They were just bars and
Prisons.
cages and boxes, and animals spent their poor, pathetic lives bored out of their friggin' minds. And so, one of the things that I really focused on was, um, in humans we have anorexia and bulimia as uh, social psychological adaptations to stress that make us either stop eating or eat too much. And in gorillas, they had the same type of things, mostly out of boredom, where they would like eat their food and then regurgitate it and then eat it again because they had nothing else to do. And so, what my research was really focusing on then was to help zoos become more humane, if you will, to um, specifically higher primates, but also towards animals in general. Um, I was also, for a very brief time, a contract archaeologist working in New Jersey. So I had an opportunity, because there are all these laws, of course, both on the federal level and the state level, that before you can put up an office building, or you have to make sure that you're not covering up anything of historical and archaeological importance. So the surveying companies or the engineering companies will have often one or two or a group of archaeologists working to do, run sight lines and do excavation to say, yeah, we can go ahead and you can go ahead and build here. There's nothing of historical significance. And that's really important, because anthropologists is, and as you well know, we are everywhere. We're in the federal government, where it's not just the ivory tower that we sit. Where I always say that anthropology is as much a state of mind as it is an occupation. That is, when I wake up in the morning and I put on my David Orenstein face, that includes being an anthropologist from morning to evening. And I think I even dream as an anthropologist, so maybe that's 24/7. I don't know.
I got to. We asked about the past and your motivations there.
Yeah.
I'd like to know now more about the future. Your
Okay.
future, our future. What do you see?
Wow. Okay. So, the future is one that I think that uh, collectively, as long as we don't, you know, destroy ourselves, there will be a human future. But we know that, you know, again, trying to avoid hubris, the earth doesn't need us. You know, when we talk about climate change and climate science and all this other stuff, we're focusing very often as much on, uh, in some cases, habitat destruction, but we're worried about, well, will there be enough to feed us? The reality is that the Earth doesn't need humans to survive. Humans need the Earth to survive.
Yeah, I'm
And
afraid I may have been a little too broad with that question. I
okay,
mean, I am talking about our immediate future.
our
Yeah,
meat.
like
You
so
mean
when
like,
when you were talking about activism, for example,
yeah?
what is it that you see as concerns? What do you see that we can address? What are you trying to do?
Okay. All right. All right. Well, that definitely gives me a little more focus. So I think that, to be an activist today means that you have to really be a multitasker, even if you're directed towards one or two things. I think that from a political point of view, um, we need to be very much organized because there are uh, the immediate threats and the long-term threats to the secular state, whether it be North America or whether it be some places in Europe, that we're seeing. We have seen this rise of despotism and this alt-right move. Um, just as equally as we have to be careful that we don't go too far, quote unquote, left, where we shut down discussion because it, quote unquote, offends us. Um, so I think, you know, to be an atheist activist today, a secular activist today, requires us to be um, uh, open and cautious at the same time, and to stand for the things that we feel are most important to us. All the litany of things that I mentioned before. Certainly, a woman's right to choose her reproductive freedom is incredibly important. The right to love who you wish is incredibly important. The right to have science textbooks that teach science and not faith is incredibly important. And so when I say being sort of the um, Swiss Army knife, if you will, of activism, is that you have to be focused on maybe one or two things, but be ready to be available to support any of these other things if they come under attack as well.
Okay. Now, I think we've been about 40 minutes
Oh,
talking,
wow.
you and I know it went by really quick.
Yeah.
But at some point, we have to be courteous to you and also to the chat. And I believe we have we have an assembled list of questions for our guest today, my dear?
I hope I
Yes,
haven't
we
bored
yes we do.
anybody, and I hope that. And I'm always paranoid that
No worries.
Yeah, I
okay.
think what we really need, you and I, is we need, as you said, we needed a bit more focus for the
Hmm.
answer. I should have had more focused. I should have had more focus in the question. I think that if we're looking at a specific policy issue,
Hmm.
then you would then we would fire right into it. I mean,
Right.
we seem to be on the same page there. I mean, we certainly agree about the Supreme Court's grievous decision today,
Hmm.
for example.
Hmm.
And
Well,
I think, go ahead.
not to add, I hope I'm not going to be adding to the negativity or pessimism, but it seems like we're the divided states of America, not the
Hmm.
United States of America. And there's things we should unite on, and we're just so politically divided.
Hmm.
And I'm not that I'm saying that we're all going to get along or we're all going to support the same causes,
Hmm.
but that it's just been so vicious with Trump and everything,
Hmm.
and political norms are out the window. Although
Right.
politics has always been kind of nasty from the founding of our nation,
Yes, absolutely.
And
There has never been a time when, I mean, up until 1865, we had slaves. Women didn't get the right to vote until 1920 in this country.
It was
So,
100 years ago.
right,
yeah,
right, exactly. We're not talking. There's the mythology of the United States, and then there's the reality of the United States. Just like every nation on the planet. Um, And so we have to be cautious not to forget our history. And as someone who loves deep history, I'm just as interested in short term as well, because there was a reason for the bus boycotts, and you know so on and so forth. So yeah, we have been frequently more divided than we have been together. I mean, it took till 1964 to have the Civil Rights Act. So and even that, you know, uh, didn't happen. Like the door opened up and the heavens said, "Thank goodness." It was trial and tribulation even then. You
And
know.
it's not like somebody suggested, "Hey, let's everybody drink from the same water fountain like regular people." Like
Right.
yeah, and
Right.
everyone else just applaud that. Hey, that's a good idea. No, there's a
Right.
whole bunch of people who are being completely pig-headed about it,
Hmm.
who have to have wrong thinking, and it's very frustrating. I want to address a question before we get to yours.
Well,
There's
hold
somebody
on
in
a
the
second.
yeah.
Um, just to add some positivity, though, there's been a lot
Okay.
of negative things going on in the United States and in other parts of the world. There, some places are getting a little bit too nationalist, and but when I first started in 2012 with ARN, atheists were voting less
Hmm.
than other. I don't know what to call us. We're not a religious belief group. We're a
Hmm.
non-belief group.
Yeah,
Um,
perspective with regard to religion is
religion.
Hmm.
But that's starting to change, and that's what we need. Is if we want secularism, there has to be a politically active, political culture that we have to
Hmm.
cultivate with people who are leaving religion, because that's happening. It's getting more and more. People are leaving religion at greater rates even now, and the younger generations are even less religious. Um,
Gallup just came out with an interesting poll about even the acceptance of evolution, and the first time I think in decades, more than half of the country accepts natural the fact that we were not divinely created. Now that doesn't mean that there isn't 30% of the country that haven't accepted that, and then there's another 12% that are on the fence. But that's you know two steps forward, one step back in a lot of these things.
yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
But I take your point, and I think it's a good point, because for the optimist in the audience, you should and here should feel good about the fact that um, we're seeing the rise of the nuns, right, as a political social factor, and that most people who are below 35 don't have a religion per se, and often if they do have some feelings of spirituality, it's a very much private matter. So those are really good trends. At the same time, I think all this pain and suffering that we're seeing with the alt-right is sort of like the last gasp, because by 2050, I mean, we've known this for decades, it's going to be a majority minority country.
I think people are going to have to work to make the future better, though, because they're
Yeah.
well, like the Supreme Court being unbalanced like that for the
Mhm.
people that are coming in uh, to I don't know, to be the community that's ruling, the younger generation, the new
Mhm.
generation. For them, there we have to defend secularism and human rights for them, because
Mhm.
I don't know what the fix is for the Supreme Court, but they're going to be dealing with some of those people because they're 50
Right.
or so, for maybe 20 more years.
Not
and
30.
and
You know.
and I have younger uh, generation kids that are in their
Mhm.
20s, and they don't have 20 years to have climate justice or activism
Mhm.
blocked by the Supreme Court, etc.
Right.
So that's the negativity there. But positively, like, what world is this new secular generation facing? And so there's that.
Well, that's why we have to be links in the chain, because I don't want anyone to grow up to be me. But if I can at least provide advice and draw attention to certain things that the next generation can take across the goal line, that's fine with me if I only get it to, 35 meters to the goal line. Because it's not like I'm going to complete the painting. There's going to be lots of other people and a lot of other artists who are going to be coloring this thing in going forward. And so, I mean, heck, by the time it's done, it may not even be a painting. It could be a sculpture, or it could be something else entirely. So, the more the merrier, Oh, let me just get one thing. Hold on. And it's only because I'm still an 8-year-old kid, but I have a copy. I have my own lawgiver. It's the only God I trust. So, Aaron, I thought you'd get a kick out of it.
I do. That should be painted.
Okay, so Aaron, you had a question?
Yeah, I wanted to address a question that I saw in the chat where somebody was asking, are we at the point of fascism in the U.S. that I should plan on leaving the country? And there's a couple of things I could say about that. And one is that, isn't it nice when you can just decide, you know what, I want to move to Norway or Vietnam or Vijayawada, India. I want to go see these other countries. Well, let me do that. Wouldn't that be nice? And we can. And when you can, you can do that. And we don't recognize that other people have the right to do that here. Why can't people say, I can afford it. Let's go move to the U.S. for a little while and see how we like it there. But we've been. What is the word that we're so discriminatory that we can't let certain people into our country? This bothers me. When I was a kid, I heard the thing about people complaining that there's so many, there's so many black people and we're running out of white people, and I remember saying, foolishly, when I was like 11, I told one of my relatives in front of a bunch of other people, I said, well, it doesn't really matter, does it? Because we're all interbreeding, so a couple of generations down the road, we're all going to be a mid-tone brown. So what difference does it make? And they were horrified. Why they found that horrible, I can't imagine, but they did. And so this is just, it's one of the first points that I recognized where I parted ways with the rest of my family, as far as, what we value. And a lot of, in my issues with religion is where they start talking about religious values, and what they're describing are not things that I would classify as values. Yeah. So enough of that. I think we can. The question was, are we at the point of fascism in the U.S. that we should consider leaving the country? While that seems a nice thought, as my son pointed out to me yesterday, he says there's nowhere to go. We have the fascism on the rise seemingly everywhere, and at some point we have to save the homeland. We have to do what we can or die trying. And there's a lot of places I'd like to go that won't even have me anymore. So yeah, I need to defend the homeland as best I can.
Yeah, the only thing I could add to that is that every generation is faced with what seems like to be incomprehensible odds, and I don't know if we certainly seem to be dancing towards this non-democratic, non-republican state, especially if we elect people. But this is the importance of voting. Now, I know people who are on the extreme left, these Bob Avakian types, and who say, no, don't vote. We need violent revolution, and we need to fix it that way. And my feeling is that we have the right to vote, and we have a right for our votes to be counted. And up until 2020, There has always been the peaceful transition of power in the United States. So let's hope that in 2024, that cooler heads and more activist heads are in charge, and that we have a free and fair election, and that election votes in people who will maintain the republic rather than destroy the republic.
Yeah, there's a couple of times you've mentioned today about the left. One of them wanting an armed revolution, and one wanting to shut down conversation that might be offensive. I identify as center of the left. I'm definitely left of center, center of the left,
Yeah.
and I can't imagine a conversation that would offend me. I know there are other people that classify the same, that identify in the same quadrant that I do, that maybe would be offended by some things, but I'm not. And I don't want an armed revolution. I want to. I'm progressive. I want to fix what's broken.
Right. I agree. And Aaron, I think we're cut from the same cloth. I come from a family that has certainly have always been left of center, and I'm proudly that. And I think some of it is the fact that we're anthropologists. So we sort of see not only both sides of the problem, but we see the top and the bottom, and we see it multidimensionally. And because of that, we're always trying to find the peaceful solution. Because once you start to destroy people's faith in each other and seeing our common humanity, we are lost, whether we call ourselves Americans or just humans.
Yeah. I think one of the other things that I have that a lot of people politically don't seem to agree with me on is they don't seem to understand. A lot of the people that I'm talking to that I'm frustrated trying to reason with don't recognize that things change inevitably.
Right.
That they think that the much like the Flintstones, it looks exactly like the 1960s. It's even though it's prehistoric age, and so too do the Jetsons. They're also somehow stuck in the 1960s.
Right.
It's not going to be like that throughout all centuries. The demographics of this country were very different if you go back 500 years than what they are, and 500 years from now they're going to look very different again.
Absolutely.
You're just going to have, and we can't stop that.
I see someone in the chat said everybody's saying to vote. Is voting going to fix the rigged system? Voting is not the end of what people should be doing, but because our political system is broken and not everybody's vote is counted, we need to vote in greater numbers. And it's you think that I hear people who say, you know what, I don't have this kind of time. I want change to happen now for my kids, and they're black and brown people. I know, but I whatever we could do to make it happen faster, it's fine. But I feel as though if people do not vote and hope that everything's going to collapse, and we could rebuild it, I don't think that's going to happen. What I think is going to happen is Democrats and independents not voting are going to keep handing the leadership of our country to more and more pandering theocrats on the right.
Exactly.
And authoritarian.
Well, you have. Oh, I'm sorry.
The system may be rigged in a sense, but voting is also the way to get that changed. If we want ranked voting, so that we don't have the necessarily limitation of two-party system where you get a third candidate who looks like a good guy, and if anybody who votes for the good third option ends up accidentally voting in the greater evil. Right. Well, if we have a ranked system, we know that doesn't happen. If we put different kind of restrictions on the money that we put into politics, I mean, there are a number of things that we can change to fix our political system, but they all start with voting, and they start with advocacy for new policies that will fix the problem.
That's right. That's right. And that's why we have to support, all of the secular organizations that we are all either speaking for or writing for. Like I write for the AHA frequently. I mean, there is one thing that you do see as sort of a touchstone, whether you're politically left or politically right, is this increase in the distrust of institutions. If you're on the left, it's because you feel like, all these white people or, Congress or, haven't fixed the systemic issues of racism. If you're on the right, it's because, the left owns all of these institutions and they're going to take away our guns. I'm giving shorthand here, and I don't mean to give, I don't want to just gloss things over because things are much more complicated than that.
Yeah.
But that seems, but to Aaron's point, the way to be actively politically, at least at the micro level, is to be able to use the vote that you've been given as a constitutional protection to speak up. Because in the United States, if you look at the number of people who actually vote, it's very low. Even in the last election, you only had about 50%. What was the percentage of people who actually even voted for Biden or Trump?
No, this was a record.
150,000 people.
Yeah, the number of people who voted for Biden, and we realized that the people were not actually voting for Biden. The people voting for Biden were voting against Trump.
Right.
So
exactly.
There are a number of things that need to be fixed in this country. One of them is the fact that corporations own politicians.
Yes.
That's a huge damn problem. And how do you overcome that short of a violent revolution? I don't think that a violent revolution anymore could even achieve that goal.
No.
Yeah.
No.
But
I mean, they took out
Given
McCain-Feingold.
Given how well armed our government is,
Mhm.
and given how much money is behind authoritarian people and corporations, I don't think they're going to let you violently overthrow their monopolies.
Yeah. You can't.
Yeah. Well, but again, and I know this is a program on science, so we've sort of gone into politics an awful lot.
Yeah, we've definitely gone into the weeds there.
Yeah. We definitely, for the sake of the conversation, at least, vote vote as many times as you can. No. Vote early and vote often, as they say.
Okay.
I see that some people are saying I live in a place where it's all blue or all red, and I don't feel like my vote matters if I am not there. But vote the top to the bottom, all of the ticket. Vote your school board. Vote wherever you can. Even in Texas,
right.
we live in red Texas. All the conservative legislation a lot of times starts here, and Dallas, the county we live in, is blue. We get blue representation in judges, and they've gerrymandered our school board. And I'm not going to say that it's that easy. Like, we have some districts that run all the way from Dallas to Austin. I mean, Fort Worth to Austin. They run from two different cities, and if you know Texas is very big, so they go quite a ways, and to get to dilute the city vote with the rural vote, and I don't mean to say that there aren't rural people who vote blue, because there are, but this feeling of learned helplessness that we can't do anything, that means we almost got Ted Cruz last time. By 2%. Beto O'Rourke, his challenger, lost by 2%. So our votes a lot of times don't count in the presidential election, but the governor's vote is coming up this midterms, and we could get rid of Greg Abbott and some of these awful policies, and we could have better school boards, better city councils, etc. And the people that don't vote, if you would just help us, we could do with this.
Yeah, just imagine what it does to my faith in humanity to know that somehow a majority of Texans still voted for Ted Cruz.
It wasn't a majority of Texans. It was a majority of people who voted in the election. A lot of people in Texas don't vote.
Yeah. Well, I always talk about, if people say my vote doesn't matter, let's remember that only 20 years ago or 22 years ago, Bush v. Gore the election was called on 550 votes in Florida. So when you think about how many votes that really is compared to all, the millions of votes that are cast, if more people get out to vote, the more likely it is that politicians will pay attention, and the more likely, we get the politicians we deserve sometimes, and if we don't make a political act of voting, because voting is a political act. It is a constitutional protection, but it is one political act that you can certainly do, whether it's the school board or all the way up to the president. So you should definitely flex that muscle, just like you should flex that muscle and support, good science education and
Exactly.
a woman's right to choose, and all these other things that we are so concerned about in the atheist and humanist community, because those are the things in terms of quality of life that really do matter, right?
Right.
Being able to send your kid to a school that teaches like science rather than theology in science class is really important, not only at the micro level, but as a competitive thing for the future of the country. So it's much bigger than any one of us, but that's why we need to be together in our own
together. Yeah, secular value
strong
voting
together.
So I brought you on this show expecting that we would talk more about yourself than we did, and I must apologize for that.
He did
I'm
talk about
happy.
himself.
I think I'm rather boring.
He did talk about himself some.
Yeah, well,
And
we did make it into more current events than your own career.
Politics or culture, therefore within the realm of anthropology.
Yeah, I guess so. But we do need to get to the questions from the chat.
Okay,
So
here's a question. Mark A. Can Professor Orenstein opine on whether he thinks charges for Trump will be a good thing or a bad thing in the short and long term in our country?
Wow. Okay, so we're going to definitely not be talking anthropology here.
We are a little bit slant-ways.
So let me just say that these are my own personal opinions, and I have no crystal ball. I think Trump, Trump University, he had to pay millions of dollars. That Trump is not a very good businessman. He's had more. The only man I know who can bankrupt a casino, right? We know all this stuff. He was impeached twice for clearly violating the Constitution, but because of politics, he was not thrown out of office. And unlike Nixon, who, believe it or not, had a modicum of consciousness to resign the presidency, Trump would never do that. I think that there is enough I think there's enough evidence to hold him legally accountable for the stuff that he tried to do in Georgia by trying, I need 1,500 votes. Can you find me 1,500 votes? I mean, that type of stuff is clearly a violation of law. Whether he will be tried for it, whether he will go, we will be found guilty or not guilty, not innocent, because I don't think he's innocent, and whether or not he'll do any jail time for it, those are much bigger things than I think I can really opine on. My hope is that he will be held accountable legally for his actions for the insurrection, which he is directly linked to. But I'm not sure, because the January 6th committee, I don't know what after they present their evidence, I know they're doing it now prime time, whether or not that leads to any legal charges against him specifically or any of his children or enablers? I frankly don't know. I think, and I think that there should be, if not political repercussions for his failures and his fascism, that there should be legal consequences for it. But I'm not a lawyer. I'm just a humble anthropologist, so I don't know.
The question was a little unfair for you, but I mean, I want to chime in on this too. It frustrates me when the very rich can commit any crime, even those that were traditionally treated as capital offenses worthy of the death penalty, and we will just let them go because they're rich or because we want them to be president again.
Right.
And so prosecutors will just refuse to prosecute. What kind of a system of law is that?
Right.
There is a lot of injustice in our justice system, but my understanding is once the January 6th committee in Congress is done, they can refer it to the Department of Justice.
Right.
So that would be awesome in a way because it would be out of the hands of Congress and getting blocked by Joe Manchin and Kirsten Sinema. I'm hoping the Department of Justice, I don't know the exact process, decides to pursue it. Merrick Garland, I believe, right? The Attorney General might be in charge of that. So that's what I hope happens.
Yeah, you can't have somebody try to take over the government, try to establish themselves as a dictator, and then just let them go and run for president again.
Right.
When you do a capital offense, you need to be held accountable. When you commit a crime, maybe on some level there might be situations where, and I can't think of an example of this, where you commit a crime and people will say that it's not worthy of prosecuting. I can't think of an example of this. But if we know that you've committed a crime, we have the proof that you committed a crime, we have the obligation to bring those charges.
Yeah. Well, it was so prophetic. Trump himself said that he could go onto Fifth Avenue and shoot someone and not be held accountable for it. And when you think about that, that was like a year before he was even elected. And here we have Capitol police officers who took their own lives. You had people who were injured. I think we all suffered a level of PTSD of watching the Capitol be overrun when this happened. And still, there are people who defend him. There are people who deny that an insurrection even took place. Some of the same congressmen who on January 6th said, this is fucked up. This is banned. A week later, it wasn't so bad. Or 6 months later, it wasn't an insurrection.
You mean, as Tucker Carlson put it, it was only a slight insurrection.
Yeah. Like light cream cheese.
We live in a post-truth society, unfortunately. Propaganda. People believe what they want to believe. Trump is almost to the level of a cult leader now.
Oh, yeah.
Because they believe that he's here saving. So a lot of people, QAnon, believe that he's here saving us from Hollywood and political pedophiles. So, it's all...
Damn.
It's crazy. But let's go to another question. Okay. Did you get Anton Gomez's super chat about the eruption of Toba?
Yeah, I did not. I saw the super chat, but he was off on something, and I didn't want to cut his momentum.
Here we go. Anton Gomez. Is David familiar with the gigantic eruption of the Toba caldera? And if so, does he think this shaped humanity in any way? Maybe we'd have had more hair, which...
Well, I think this is at a point where humanity almost died out. If I'm thinking of the
Yeah,
right thing, where you had this huge volcanic event.
74,000 years ago.
Yeah, which when you think about it, our numbers, which were not very big in Africa to begin with, really shrunk us down quite tremendously to the point where there might have just been about what 35,000, 17,000 of us around. And when I say us, I mean anatomically modern humans.
Yeah, I know that
Um,
we had there was evidence of humanity already across southern Asia
right,
and into maybe into Australia as well
right.
when this thing went out. So there was an initial migration that left archaeological evidence anyway.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
yeah. So maybe what have done is might have done like what's considered like a background extinction. Like maybe some of us would have died out in Africa, but we had already moved out by that time, pretty much. With the out of Africa hypothesis, and so. We could speculate, would we have had more hair? I mean, the fact of the matter is we don't really have much hair now, and it really is almost vestigial. It doesn't really serve any type of major function anymore, except, for the cosmetics industry.
Yeah, I
um,
want to throw in that it looks like our significant body hair reduction came a whole long time earlier than that.
yes, yes, absolutely, absolutely. It was not as thick, so it had thinned out generations and generation. I mean, not maybe not even our species, maybe even earlier than that. Because if you look at like um, Homo erectus, which is our direct ancestor, ours and Neanderthals' direct ancestors, I don't think they were as hairy themselves. So if you keep going, as my coffee cup sort of shows with Darwin here, right?
Mhm.
You keep going back one root ancestor and you see the modifications of its lineage, and you see that in anatomically modern humans as well as you see that in Neanderthals.
What I'm basing my estimate on is the fact that human head lice is very closely related to chimpanzee
Hmm.
body lice, but of course it's limited to our heads because
Hmm.
we don't have the body hair, but our pubic lice is very closely related to gorilla lice, and that
Wow.
that makes that makes an uncomfortable um, thought.
Well, I
But
didn't know that. And I just keep thinking about chimpanzees. One of the things that is the social glue of chimpanzee behavior is the idea of grooming behavior.
so there's a discrepancy of about 3 million years where our
Hmm.
pubic lice did not intermingle with our head lice. And so however we acquired the gorilla lice, and I honestly think it was relatively innocent things, just sitting where gorillas sat is all I'm thinking that was.
Because they
Yeah.
nest on the ground.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, but the thing is when you don't have the gorilla lice mingling with the chimpanzee lice, means that there's no intermediate area for them to do that. Meaning that
Hmm.
we had head hair and we had pubic hair and we didn't have body hair. That's the
Nothing in
only
the middle.
logical explanation for that.
Hmm. Hmm.
Okay.
Yep. And you got to remember, like in trees, like topiaries, you have such diversification, right? So, you might have 15 species living in a tree that never come into contact with each other just because some are in the topiary and some are on the ground, and that's just their ecological niche. So,
Okay. This question from Anton Gomez.
And he's been making donations that I haven't been
Yes.
calling out on this show, and
Well,
I
I
want
think
to
I
thank
skipped.
him for that. I have
Yes.
to say that on the matter of fact science, I have not been able to call out when people make their donations because sometimes the guests have been, um,
Unpacking a
yeah,
complex topic.
and it's just not appropriate to throw in that we have this donation from whatever, I apologize for that, but this show has to follow a different format in that case.
Okay, I skipped Jack Russell though. Do any of you think that you're fighting a losing battle and that USA will eventually become a Christian nationalist theocracy in years to come?
Oh, worse than that. I think that we're going to become an Islamic nation.
Because all of these theocratic rules are paving the way for the next more dominant popular religion.
Exactly.
I'm not sure if we're going to go there because when I talk to conservatives, they say that you think secularism is keeping Islam from running the United States, but actually Christian theocracy would prevent that. So
yeah, but Christianity is in a state of decline worldwide, and especially in the United States. But every law that they pass, every faith-based initiative that is meant to benefit Christianity, is only going to aid in the Islamification. So remember that Islam is the fastest growing religion and remains to be the fastest growing religion for a number of reasons, while Christianity is in a state of decline. So just it doesn't take difficult math skills to understand how the Muslims are going to be the dominant religion in the United States.
Even if Christians stay in power, the more power they amass, the sectarian fighting will start.
So is it going to be secular
against the Catholics?
Is it going to be secular or sectarian?
Etc.
It doesn't matter what the religion is. It needs to be secular. And if we establish that first, then we have a defense against the sectarians, whichever religion they turn out to be.
Right. I mean, we just have to go back and remember the Treaty of Paris. You know,
I'm sorry, I forgot the Treaty of Paris.
It's you know, the United States is not a Christian nation.
No, it's Treaty of Tripoli.
Oh, or Treaty of Tripoli. Pardon me. Excuse me. But yes, and that goes for any religion. There should be no state religion in the United States at any point if we are to be a republic, democracy, whatever you want to call it.
How do we?
Then we will have we might as well be the Handmaid's Tale.
How do we undo or correct the Supreme Court's recent decision?
Well, you need to have new people on the Supreme Court. I mean, I don't know how you have to have. It's a 6-3 court now, and there's only 9 justices. So there's no counterbalance, and so you've got these religious zealots who are going to find for religion every time now. That is now the trend. So the only way to stop this is either widen the number of people who are on the Supreme Court. There's no reason why it just has to be 9, right? Or for some reason, and hopefully it's a nonviolent one, their vacancies occur on the Supreme Court where more. And I don't want to say the word liberal. I want to say more judges who respect the Constitution from a secular perspective will find for.
I think I know the thought that you're going for. You're expecting justices to be constitutional scholars and not the people we've recently added.
Right. Because do you know that none of these justices that came about, and certainly none that are on the federal bench, under the Trump administration, they stopped taking the ABA's recommendations. They used to have, up until I think for the last 40 years, the previous presidential administrations would accept the ABA's counsel on the fitness of judges for the federal bench and for the Supreme Court. And it was under Trump, he said, no, not anymore.
Well, because there are people who spend their lives doing evaluations of other people's past performances, so that they have all of these graphs and charts and identify, how they've identified and graded all of these people, and then Trump says, "Well, no, this one's my sister-in-law."
Right.
So yeah,
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
And again, it
Okay.
goes to the point of not trusting authority, right? So it's not trusting the legal system. It's not trusting science and scientists. I mean, look at these people were screaming, hang Fauci during the pandemic. So there's this lack of acceptance of scientific authority, as well as authority based on expertise. My opinion is more valid or equal to your expertise.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
We need to move on
We're
to the next question because my wife has a
yeah.
plane to catch pretty soon.
Oh, okay. All right.
Okay.
Yep.
Some of them are this kind of the same question, so I'm gonna run quickly. And sorry if I skipped your question. Benny Olson, thank you for $20. Maybe Danish. What's DKK currency?
That's
And the
Danish kroner, isn't it?
kroner,
Mhm.
perhaps. And the USA is a relatively young nation. It is very young. We go to Europe and like Denmark, and a lot of the
Right.
buildings are just
Right.
commonly older than our country. But
Right.
next, this one is kind of what everybody's been saying. Lena, to be honest, I'm in poverty and plan on using my settlement money from getting hit by a car to escape. I don't see a future here and need some hope. I believe this is a valid point. For a lot of people, they can't even make rent or pay for food here, and there are other countries that they could. But that on the other side of that, for me, it's like you could move from Texas, or you could move to another state, or you could move from the United States to another country. There's just some kind of like a lot of people can't move. They have family obligations. They don't
Right.
have the money to move. So a lot of people are stuck.
That, and you're just leaving your neighbors to that same fate.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sorry. First of all, I'm sorry that you were involved in a car accident, and I hope, Lena, that you are well enough to be able to live your life, whether you stay in the United States or not. But yeah, I mean, hold on to your money, because we are coming. If you think that the middle class has been shrinking since the 1950s, A, you would be right. But B, with inflation growing and other things growing, it's getting harder and harder for people to eke out just a, a modicum of living. We spend, and I talk about this with my students all the time. We talk about $15 as a living wage, and the battle for that. But we never talk about, and even that is a battle. It's a political battle. It's an emotional battle. We never talk about like a thriving wage. Like, a living wage just gets your rent paid and your bills paid, but it doesn't really give you much of anything else. Why don't we have the conversation in this country about a thriving wage, where people can not only pay their bills, but also take a vacation, save money for their own education. And I think some of the things that we really need to make that happen, aside from raising wages, which itself might create inflation and things like that, but we're the only real Western democratic nation that doesn't have, like in the UK, an NHS, a national health system. I mean, you get sick in the United States and you don't have health insurance. You don't go to the doctor, so you die, or you wind up in bankruptcy court because it costs $50,000 to spend a week in the hospital. So there are a lot of systemic problems in the United States, which all lead to these feelings of angst, and I've got to leave in order to have a good life, which we shouldn't be shying away from, whether we're secularists or not, because we need to be able to make the world a better place for each other.
Okay. And the next, just quickly, Woody Woodpecker. is at the pound, $1.99 pound. And the next person, thank you. And the next God 420, thank you, God. $2 Canadian. I hope one day we can have a beer and a chat. Thank you, God 420. And next, God 420, also another $2. Oh, that's the same one. Here we go to the next one. Fellow traveler, $5 US. Arn, I'm a longtime fan, been watching you for years. Question: how would one go about reaching you via email? Have important things I want to show or
Yeah,
share?
I already answered that one in the chat.
Okay.
Yeah, Bucky the Beaver shared one I want to address. Congress can also pass bills and amendments that contradict the Supreme Court decisions, though it can be hard if it's shown to be against the Constitution. But things like Roe v. Wade isn't against the Constitution; it's just being ruled as the Constitution doesn't uphold this protection, so they're leaving it to the governments to pass laws for regulating it. Well, I appreciate that sentiment, and I hope that's the case, that Congress can pass amendments that contradict the Supreme Court decisions. I was not aware that they could do that. I thought that if the Supreme Court hadn't yet ruled on it, then we might be able to codify something like this into law. But I don't know.
We don't have a majority. We have a slim majority, and Mencken and Sinema are holding that up.
Yeah, well, this gives me back to the previous point I made about voting.
Mm-hmm.
Why do we still have Democrats who only vote Republican?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So move on to the
my
next one.
prediction is once if Roe is struck down by the Supreme Court, and it becomes a states' rights issue, that you're going to have essentially the Underground Railroad of people traveling either west or east to seek not only abortion, safe and legal medical abortions, but also healthcare as well.
Even in the state of Texas, because it's so large, if you shut down abortion access in a city here,
right,
people can't afford to take off and pay for a hotel and pay and wait the waiting period as well off of work. Some people don't have that kind of time to take off work. They have
Sure.
kids. A lot of people who need an abortion already have kids.
Yeah,
But
one of the reasons they can't afford children is they already have children.
and then talk about going to another state to get an abortion. You just added another level of financial burden on people who, a lot of times people who need abortions are not always are in having financial difficulties. I mean, rich women will a lot of times be able to get an abortion, but sometimes not because of these bans of even discussing abortion. So if somebody needs a medical abortion, the doctor in some of these states are even scared to discuss that they might need an abortion, because then because aiding and abetting abortion after the bans, after 10 weeks or whatever the ban's going to be here after the Roe v. Wade, I don't want to say it like it's a done deal, but it's struck down. It could be no abortion, and it could be illegal for doctors to even discuss it. Hey, you need chemo, you need an abortion. It just, how can a doctor even bring it up if they're going to get sued, have their license taken away, go to jail, etc. So it's just there. We keep doing these workarounds for the government, but you can't work around the Supreme Court. You can't work around some of these things. We need better representation. I'm 51, and I could obtain a legal abortion in Texas when I was 18 in the early 1990s, but there were cultural and financial barriers to that, like religion, that discourages women from even using contraception.
Right.
But then now, for this next generation of young women, they could be raped through incest or molestation by an adult and they have to carry the child, and
Mhm.
because of abortion bans, and people under 18 don't have legal rights to travel to another state to get an abortion or get an abortion in the first place, in some states without parental permission. So like these layers of complexity, people are suffering in Texas right now because of the 10-week abortion ban.
Mhm.
All of a sudden your blood pressure, you can't sustain a pregnancy that you wanted at at after 10 weeks. Too bad, risk your life. You know,
Mhm.
to be fair, medical abortions are allowed here, but doctors are again are afraid to discuss it with women.
Right. Yeah,
No.
and this is the chilling effect that religion has when it creeps into our secular world. It stops us from being able to live good and healthy lives, right? It makes us, it sort of makes us, it gives us the Hobson choice of really not having any choice at all, simply because of the parameters that are set up, which take away our ability to live free, secular lives. And it's
Like,
very painful.
it would be awesome if the humanistic goal of humans flourishing was where we were all at, but
Hmm.
some people aren't even at the surviving level. Some people are going to die without
Hmm.
access to a safe and legal abortion.
Yes.
Someone in the chat just said that my wife is smart. I just got to brag again. She has a master's of science writing from Johns Hopkins. So,
Excellent.
I
Absolutely.
don't even brag about it, but thank you very much. Okay, let me see. Maybe there's only one more. I don't know. I don't want to leave people feeling hopeless. Although I don't want to be toxically positive.
Yeah, I
Like,
don't want
it's pretty
anybody to be
grim.
complacent.
Don't be
Right.
complacent.
Right.
That's how we got here.
Right.
Yes, not voting is how we got here too.
Hmm.
We keep letting the fascists and authoritarians make decisions for us.
That's right.
There is another super chat from David Soul. Do you see it, Aaron?
I don't.
It's
Oh, there it
coming up.
is. There it is.
Okay.
Hello, there are a few YouTube. This is for $5. Thank you very much for that. Hello, there are a few YouTube. There are a few YouTube voices I could listen to for hours. RN being one. I cannot wait to sit through every raw vid with my granddaughter. Thank you so very much for that.
That's
It's
sweet.
very kind. Yes.
I didn't know Lena had one more question. What efforts could be made towards allying with moderate and liberal Christianity? There are efforts like that called the Texas Freedom Network in Texas. It was
Hmm.
founded by Ann Richards' daughter, the only female governor of Texas back when you could be a Democrat and get elected for that short
Hmm.
window.
Hmm.
Cecily Richards, and they do ally to defend LGBTQ rights with and secularism specifically, uh,
Hmm.
uh, science education, etc. With moderate and liberal Christians. I was asked to talk to a group of Jewish women in Dallas who are in support of abortion rights.
Right.
So not every
Yeah.
religious person is anti-abortion.
Well, you have to remember when we talk about secularism, someone can be religious and still be secular, just like someone can be a humanist and still be secular.
Or still be religious, I
I
think
mean,
is what
still be
you're.
religious. Yeah,
Yeah.
you don't have to not have faith to want to live in a secular state where people have equality, and you can be religious and be humanistic as well. There's the center of humanistic Judaism for one thing. So I would put my quote unquote faith in our common humanity, however you want to address it. If you want to call yourself an atheist or an agnostic or a Christian or a Jew or even a Muslim, and still want to live in a pluralistic, secular society, I will be your friend and I will support you because you're supporting me. Because my goal is not to take away anyone's religion. My goal is to live in a society where my lack of belief in the divine is an equal space, lives in the same equal space as your belief is to believe in God.
Secularism, it protects religious freedom.
Yes.
Because everybody has the right to practice religion as they please, just not in our publicly funded by everybody's government.
Right.
Yeah, we are going to have to find a way to close this up because my wife really does have a plane to catch.
Okay. Well, safe travels.
Thank you, David, for being on.
Yeah, no, it's been my pleasure. And if you ever would like me again, please feel free. I will make a financial contribution as well. I mean, I think that's great. And if I can support your channel, that would be great.
That's huge, and thank you very much for that. I would love to have you on, if not for this show, of course, but for other types of shows that we do. I'd love to have you on again.
Yeah, I've got plenty of these that I could talk about in detail. If you
Oh
want.
my goodness. We didn't get to human evolution.
We definitely need to do.
It's
We
just,
definitely need to do another show. Just give me an idea what kind of outline you want to do, and I'll be happy to have you on again.
yeah, sure. No
Did you
problem whatsoever.
recognize my shirt, sir?
Yeah, it's wonderful. Yes, I love it. Yes. I'm jealous. I want one.
I'll send you the link.
All right, cool.
All right, so we're going to close it up, and I want to thank everybody who donated all the questions and everything. And I'm sorry to be so rushed, but I'm looking at the time, and I'm wondering how my wife is going to make it to the airport on time. So,
Okay.
thank you very much, and we'll go
Thank
ahead
you.
and close out.
Thank you, everybody.